I'm very happy to have Alexander here now with introducing Monero. And yeah, where is Alexander? Alexander, yeah. One more important thing, we are talking about privacy today. At the same time, we will have a video recording here. So if you don't like to be part of the video recording, yeah, please check out the focus of the camera, and yeah, that's how it works. Thank you so much.
Okay, yes, hello, welcome. My name is Alex. I work as an editor and educator, yes, that's my title, for BTC Echo, which is the largest German-speaking Bitcoin and blockchain-focused magazine. And I'm a big Monero fan. So I want to share my knowledge with you today. Let me just make a quick survey of the audience. Who here has heard of Monero? Okay, most everybody. And who here owns Monero?
I lost it in the boarding exam.
Good answer. Okay, so I will give a more general talk. I will talk a little bit about the technical details, but more in the broad context of why does it matter. And I want to answer this question by the end of the talk. What does it take to be fungible? And let's just dive right in. Oh, and also please hold your questions till the end, and I will have a little shorter talk so we can have more time discussing, and in the questions you can ask me anything. So what does it mean to be fungible? That's the first question we have to answer when it comes to this. Fungibility is the attribute of a certain commodity, and it means, it could be described as homogeneity, that all units of that commodity are indistinguishable from one another. So a typical example would be if I have two 1 euro coins, I can change them and there is no loss of value whatsoever. Like you won't even notice that I've exchanged them. Whereas, let's take a non-fungible good. If I have two diamonds, well, it depends on what kind of diamonds these are, and most likely they're not fungible, meaning that if you have a diamond and I have a diamond and we change, some kind of value gets transmitted or lost if we pretend like they're equal. And so this is fungibility. This is the most important aspect I want you to take home from this talk today. Fungibility means the homogeneity or indistinguishability of units. And why is this important now, especially for cryptocurrencies? Well, fungibility is important for money because in a money you have prices. So if I go to the bakery and I buy my pretzel, it's going to cost me 1 euro. And that only has meaning if all 1 euros are the same. If it said 1 pretzel equals 1 diamond, then I go up to the baker and it's like, well, what kind of diamond do you mean when you put that price tag on? So it is essential for a price system to have a fungible money commodity. And here, this picture is a chain analysis of Bitcoin. And I just want to touch on this really briefly. Bitcoin is not fungible in the way Monero is, because in Bitcoin I see the whole history of a certain output to the very day it was mined. And for example, now I can attach a certain value to that history. For example, I can say, oh, Satoshi mined that coin, I value this 1 Bitcoin as more than 1 Bitcoin, because it has sentimental value to me. Or a negative example, drugs were purchased with that Bitcoin, and therefore it's not worth 1 Bitcoin, it's more worth like half a Bitcoin. And you see when you go to the marketplace that it's impossible to have a price system if you have only, if the goods are not fungible or the money commodity is not fungible. So it is important for money to be fungible so you can have prices. And prices are the essential backbone of any market. Okay, so let's now go into why Monero is fungible while Bitcoin is not. They're both very similar in the way that they're proof-of-work-based cryptocurrencies. However, while in Bitcoin all transactions are transparent and you can see what address spends to what address what amount, in Monero all this information is hidden or obfuscated. So that means all transactions that happen on the Monero blockchain are private by default. And this means that transactions are untraceable and unlinkable. Let me unpack these terms a little bit, because untraceability and unlinkability are two very important concepts when it comes to privacy. And it means, traceable means that when you look at the blockchain you cannot tell, oh, this address paid to this address and then this address paid to this address, so you cannot trace the route of the money. And unlinkable means you cannot link it to a real world identity of, for example, Thomas Müller, who KYC'd at an exchange and therefore put his, linked his identity to the blockchain. Okay, and all transactions in Monero are untraceable and unlinkable. How is that done? It's done with three features of the protocol, which are baked into the protocol, called ring signatures, stealth addresses, and ring confidential transactions. How these work in detail, I will explain in the next few slides. Let me just summarize this whole slide by saying we want to have as little information leaking from the blockchain or from the network as possible, so that the tracing and linking of spending outputs or receivers gets hidden. And here's a graphic visualization of the three aspects. Of course you can tell there's a fourth one here. Let me just say the sender is hidden by ring signatures, the amount of the transaction is hidden by ring confidential transactions, and the receiver is hidden by something called stealth addresses. And this part here is the obfuscation of the network. So for example, if I boot up my computer and I connect to the internet, I am getting an IP address, and if I then broadcast a transaction from that IP address, if somebody is listening in the network, they may record that and actually get some information about my geographical location from the origin of the transaction broadcast. Okay, so let's dive in. Stealth addresses, is that the first step? Yeah. Okay, stealth addresses is a very solid conception in privacy because it hides the receiver of a transaction. And this is done by, actually, when you look at the Monero blockchain, you won't ever see like a public key. When you go into your wallet and you copy-paste your receiving address, that's what I'm referring to. Those don't touch the blockchain. Instead, what happens is when somebody sends you Monero, they take your receiving address and they generate a one-time stealth address that they then post on the blockchain. And this is awesome because nobody, by looking at the address, is able to tell who actually this address belongs to. So yeah, that's how condensed, that's how the receiver gets hidden in Monero. And also, I want to just mention that every Monero transaction has at least 2 outputs. So that's another mechanism to further reduce the information you are able to gain by looking at the blockchain. Because if, for example, you sweep your wallet, you take all the funds, you may only have 1 output of a transaction. In Monero, that is never the case. Even if 1 output is 0, there's always 2 outputs. And as I will touch on in a second here, you can't see if there is an output that is 0 because the outputs or the amounts are hidden. Okay, then ring signatures. This is a slightly lesser solid pillar of the Monero protocol because it doesn't give complete privacy, it more or less gives plausible deniability. And which is still solid, and if you do enough transaction that actually is just fine. But just want to preface that here, it's plausible deniability that ring signatures provide. And that is done by, when I send a transaction, for example, to Jeff, I look on the blockchain and I take other inputs, random inputs, and with these random inputs, we call them decoy, form a ring signature. And any of the decoys or my input may be the real spending output, but we don't know that. That's what it means to have plausible deniability. And there is another term in Monero called the ring size that just refers to how many members in the ring signatures there are. So for example, right now we have a mandatory ring size of 11. That means for any transaction there is 11 possible spending outputs. And so now if you're thinking, you say, wait a minute, if you can't tell what output is actually spending, how do you know that there is not money created out of thin air? And that's the reason we have the key image, which is unique for each output, and every key image can only be on the blockchain once. If you see a key image twice, you know that the output has already been spent and you reject that transaction. If you want to know how the key image is generated, it's a more technical discussion, so I won't go into that here. But yes, we can still make sure that every output only gets spent once. And then finally we have something called ring CT, or ring confidential transactions. This is used to, as I mentioned before, hide the amount of a transaction, and this is good because, for example, maybe I pay 0.32189 something Monero, which is a very odd amount. And so if just the sender and the receiver, but not the amount, gets obfuscated, then you may still be able to at least deduce some information about who spent what in the Monero network. And also, like I mentioned before, if you have a zero value output, then that would also be recognized. So that's why we have ring CT. It's a form of zero knowledge proof, which basically tells you, without revealing what the values are, that the values that go in match the values that go out. And we have that so no new coins are minted, because you could imagine if you don't see the amounts, well then the input that goes out is less than what comes out and I just minted new coins. Well, that's not possible because it's cryptographically secured with a zero knowledge proof. And so yeah, these three basic mechanisms are at work in Monero right now, and they hide, like I said, all transaction information about the sender, receiver, and the amount of a transaction. And soon there will be a network obfuscation that will also hide your IP address. And all of this, as I mentioned before, is done by default. So this is very important when it comes to privacy, because there's the camp of philosophy where we have the transaction public, and if you want to go into a private environment, you can do that. For example, Dash has the optional private send, or Zcash has the optional Z addresses. In Monero, you are private by default, and you can opt out if you want. So if, for example, I'm a government organization or I'm a charity organization and I want to ensure my clients or subjects that I don't fool with their money, I can give them a so-called view key, and then they can type that into their block explorer and monitor my wallet, for example. And what this achieves, actually, this default privacy opt-out, is that you have a much larger anonymity set. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Which means, basically, I always think about it like this. Imagine everybody of us would wear a mask. Then we had a very good anonymity set because everybody is private. If just 3 people here in this room wear a mask, sure, we couldn't see their faces, but we could tell them apart from the other crowd. And so Fluffy Pony, the Pope of Monero, he gave an example. You are in a bus and then the bus gets stopped and the law enforcement agency wants to makes all the people get out, and they are looking for a guy with an orange hat. And there are 10 people with an orange hat. Well, they just are going to arrest all of them and then figure it out later who they were looking for, in fact. And I want to emphasize this again. For fungibility, you have to have the default privacy, that is opt-out. Because if you don't, then most people won't do it, because what do they have to hide, right? And then the prices can't form, and you can't really have an economy based on the cryptocurrency. So fungibility is essential for sound money, and fungibility is achieved by having all the units indistinguishable from one another, which we do by making all of the information that go into a transaction private. And so, if you want to get started with Monero, here are some resources. I recommend especially the subreddit, which has quite a decent community. Also, the monero.how is a great way to figure out how to set up a secure paper wallet, for example, or just learn more about Monero. And if you want to use it on a mobile device, I recommend only those two apps, Monero for Android and Cake Wallet for iOS. Do not use Free Wallet; it's a scam, and you will get cheated of your Monero. So here are some more resources from me. I do a German podcast quite irregularly, unfortunately, called Monero Mumble, where we talk about just things that happen in Monero. Then I have a more anarchy-focused podcast that I do on my own, and yeah. Basically, my handle is AlexAnarcho everywhere, so you can just find me. And yeah, that was Monero, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Yeah.
How do backups work? I mean, how do you have to digitally back up your private key, or can you also save? Do you also have a seed?
I actually brought some printouts of paper wallets. You just have 25 words, so it's a different format than in Bitcoin. In Bitcoin you usually have 12 words or 24. In Monero you have 25, and you just write them down on a piece of paper, and it works the same as in Bitcoin, that you always can restore your master key from the seed phrase. So if anybody wants a paper wallet, you can grab one later. Yeah.
Do you have something like script? Bitcoin script?
I don't think so. I'm not a developer, so I don't know. But what I've come to understand is Monero, since privacy is hard to achieve, they strip basically everything else out of the protocol, and they just focus on, let's have a fungible cryptocurrency. So I don't know, but I don't think so. Yep.
Didn't Fluffy Pony a while ago, maybe it was also another troll project, but didn't he announce something like colored coins or tokens on Monero?
Yeah, that's actually a new project that Fluffy Pony is...
Was this year, I believe, yeah.
Yeah,
maybe around
it's called Tari, and basically it's supposed to be something like Counterparty for Bitcoin, where you could have digital assets on, not on the Monero chain, but it's a merged mine sidechain, so you could have atomic swaps between Monero and Tari, and you could have like concert tickets, for example, or in-game video items on Tari. And as far as I understand it, the project is very young. They're still constructing the architecture, so it's not quite sure what it will be in the end, but yeah, it's something like digital asset protocol. Yeah.
May I?
Yeah.
Is it possible for me to uncover some information about senders or receivers if I control more than 50% of the network?
You mean mining nodes?
Yes. So the average of 51%.
I don't think there's a high risk of learning anything about the... like if you're a miner, basically you don't learn anything about the transactions. You just validate the proof, you just do the proof of work. So if you actually want to learn something about the real spender, for example, oh, is that working? if you want to learn something about the real spender, you would have to spam the network with transactions, and that attack is unfeasible because you have to have a lot of transactions, and even then you wouldn't. Like how the attack would work is you have a lot of outputs which you know are not true spending outputs, and then you look at the blockchain and you basically can cross out those outputs out of the ring signature. But even then you may not come to a 100% conclusion who was the spending output. You maybe decrease the anonymity set from 11 to 7 or something, but I don't think it's a feasible attack. And I think there was a paper on that, so yeah, actually there is a Monero Research Lab that hires 2 mathematicians full-time, and they're crowdfunded by the community, and they focus like on a scientific approach to attack vectors like these, and I think they wrote a paper about that it's not a feasible attack. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Could you maybe compare to Zcash if everybody was using Z addresses? How would it compare?
As far as I understand it, the privacy in Zcash is actually better because in Zcash you don't learn anything about the what goes on in the network. Whereas in Monero you still get some information, or with ring signatures you only have plausible deniability. However, I would say that the trusted setup, for example, of Zcash is already a fatal flaw for like a true private cryptocurrency. So maybe like something like Zcash with the with the now sapling update, and everybody has to use a Z address, and then yeah, it may actually be better. But I think the privacy in Monero is just fine as it is right now. Yeah.
So speaking about privacy, which I guess is the topic anyway. What is the current global regulatory situation for Monero? Because as far as I know, there's a couple of countries that, or maybe just exchanges, that have sort of banned Monero because of the anonymity or privacy. What's the status on that?
I'm not 100% sure if I'm up to date, but there was a situation where Japan put pressure on exchanges to delist the privacy coins like Dash, Zcash, Monero, and Augur, I think. And so it's not a ban per se. They don't say you can't list it, but they say if you do list it, we don't give you a license. So they're basically leaning with their regulatory weight on the exchanges to incentivize them to delist the coins. And I think Japan, I'm not sure if they actually even do it still, but yeah, I mean, it's only a centralized exchange that you can regulate, in my opinion. So once there is actually user-friendly decentralized exchanges, I don't think it will be a big problem.
So it was just Japan so far?
As far as I know, yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
So I may be wrong, but it seems to me that the biggest problem with ringed confidential transaction was the size of transactions. And recently it has been replaced fully by bulletproofs, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
And what is bulletproof?
Okay, so when do I have the clicker still? Wait. So, yeah. Bulletproofs, so ring signatures, like I said, are a zero knowledge proof, and those are very space intensive to have, because we want to make sure that inputs equal outputs without actually revealing any of the information. And I mean, when I say space intensive, it's a couple of kilobytes, which may not seem a lot. You know, you have a music song that's a couple of megabytes, but you know, if you have a couple of thousands of transactions, those actually add up. And I think from the time Ring CT was implemented mandatory to the time that they implemented bulletproofs, the blockchain grew something like 40 gigabytes or something crazy. And one transaction, the smallest transaction was like 12 kilobytes. And now you have an optimization of the zero knowledge proof. They went from, I'm probably going to mess this up, but from Beryllium range proofs to bullet proofs, and it's basically just an optimization in space, so in the amount of bytes it requires. And now the smallest transactions is like 1.8 kilobyte, and this effect also shows in the transaction fee. Small transaction, and by that I mean one input, two outputs, was like 30 cents before, and now it's half a cent. So there's a vast improvement, like 90% of the transaction size actually gets cut, which is great for scaling because the blockchain doesn't get so big so fast. Still, Monero transactions are huge when you compare it to Bitcoin. Yeah. Yep.
Based on the attention that the project got over the last years, like I'm a little bit surprised in terms of what projects or how few projects are going on around it, like in terms of wallets, and also I think like support on Ledger was just very recently added. Do you have an intuition why that is? Is it very hard to develop with it, or?
Yeah, so Monero is similar to Bitcoin in the way it functions with the proof of work based blockchain, but it's completely different in terms of code base. And therefore, you know, when you have a Bitcoin wallet, it's not hard to make a Litecoin wallet because it's pretty much the same. If you have a Bitcoin wallet and you want to make a Monero wallet, you have to start from scratch. And that's why, for example, the Ledger took so long. And as far as I can tell, there's more and more projects going on in the Monero community. The Monerujo and Cake Wallet are community projects. Monerujo gets funded through the funding forum system, which is basically like a Kickstarter, more or less, for Monero. And then there was an effort to make a hardware wallet, a dedicated hardware wallet for Monero, which is not available for purchase, last I'm aware. But yeah, it's slow because it's an open source community, and if you want something to happen, you actually have to make it happen. And there's nothing like a certain budget, like in Dash, that you can just allocate to whatever you want. And so also like the marketing of Monero is pretty much non-existent. It's just getting now started because people are saying, hey, I want to, I don't know, educate people about this. So everything is very grassroots, and in my opinion it has a slower starting time, but I think the changes you actually make or the things you build are more lasting than if you just have it top down and throw money at it. Yeah.
A very practical question. If I identify Monero as a great project and I want to support it with investing some money into it, what would you recommend for a wallet? I was dealing with that for one time, and I identified that there's only the option of having like a full node, or having like a paper wallet created like with an online service or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would never create a paper wallet with an online service.
So getting the script, or getting the script on a local layer and create with that feeling.
Like, you don't have to run a full node to create a wallet. You can download the GUI, which is Graphic User Interface Wallet from the Monero project, which you can get at monero.org/downloads. And in that Graphic User Interface Wallet, you have the option of connecting to a remote node. So you don't actually have to download the 60 gigabytes blockchain, but you just get it from another node in the network.
Okay, but you have to bring that computer online to create the.
No, technically you could download the wallet file, and this is actually the most secure way I'm aware of to create a lasting paper wallet that you want to use as a vault. You download the file and verify the hash so that it's not corrupted, and then you boot up your computer with a live distribution of Linux, and you don't take it online, but you unpack the package from there and you start your wallet. And you know, the generation of the seed doesn't need to be online for that. So just running the wallet, initially setting up a new wallet, and then writing down the 25 seed words will do the trick. And then you can actually copy-paste your receiving address from that wallet without ever going online and just, I don't know, paste pin it to your online computer.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.